A very warm welcome to everybody joining. We'll give it a couple of moments for everybody who's in our waiting room to join, and then we'll get started. Wow, very good. A very, very warm welcome to you, and thank you for joining us wherever you join us from today. I'm truly delighted to be here today with Tolu Peters talking about the evolution of employee value propositions and their impact on organisational HR practices. A warm welcome, Tolu.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you all for who've dialed in for being with us today. As we talk today, if you have questions, please do type them in the chat. We will be visiting the chat in particular around about 1/2 and again, probably around about 1/4 the hour. If you'd like to, we're a real privilege today, been joined from people from all around the world. So if you'd like to, please do type into the chat where you're from, where you're joining us from today. It'd be lovely to have a flavour. We're hoping to have a lovely, very much relaxed conversation today. Just as I say, we'll pause a couple of times to check in and have questions. We've got lots to share, but important to say that we're recording this session today for those who couldn't join us, and very much hope you enjoy our conversation. So, thank you so much. Hello from Wilmington, Delaware. Thank you, Monica. How lovely. And to the rest of you, that's lovely. Thank you. Well, so Tolu is, and it's a real privilege to have Tolu with us. She's a distinguished HR leader with global HR and organisational experience, a really wide breadth and depth across national, multinational financial institutions in particular. She's an executive coach, a change practitioner, and a certified facilitator. And there's probably lots more I could say, but actually, maybe I could ask you, Tolu, to share a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself.
Of course. Thank you so much, Patrina. I'm really appreciative of the invitation, and thank you for all the wonderful things you've said.
Oh,
I am a strategic human resource advisor, executive coach, and a leadership development facilitator. And currently, I am also the director of a community leadership initiative, the Jesus House DC Daniel Leadership Institute, based in Silver Spring, Maryland, USA. There, we actually implement 3 programs separately focused on building leadership capacity in young professionals, managers preparing for executive roles, and also provide learning sessions to the community as a way of giving back. Last but not the least, I am a member of the advisory board for Africa Health Matters, and more recently, a member of the Women in Business Advisory Board for the Graduate School of Business, University of Cape Town in South Africa.
thank you so much. What a breadth of experience, and we very much look forward to hearing some wonderful, rich insights as we chat in today's great conversation. Would you mind, just to give us a flavour of you, would you mind telling us a sort of your career to date, or perhaps a summary of some highlights you might like to share with us?
Absolutely. I would like to share my career experience in two parts, actually. The first part of my career was in Africa, specifically
Mhm.
Nigeria, and the second part will be the continuation of my career in the USA, and it will include work done in other regions like Asia, Middle East, and Europe. I started my career at UAC Nigeria, an affiliate of Unilever UK at that time, and there I held different positions as training manager, sales manager, and personal manager. And this actually was where I developed my foundational HR knowledge and experience. It was also where my managerial skills started to develop. So it was excellent training for me to be there. I subsequently moved to PricewaterhouseCoopers as a HR consultant. And this was a different type of work. Here, I managed external clients for the first time, and I had to understand their business and determine how their HR organization would better be equipped to support priorities. During that time as well in Nigeria, a lot of financial institutions were springing up in the country, and I felt ready to apply my skills and experience as the pioneer head of human resources at Oceanic Bank, joining the effort to establish the HR department. I later moved to FSB International Bank, now Fidelity Bank, as group head of HR and corporate affairs. And then I moved to the second part of my career, as I call it, where I was headhunted for a position as a human resource accounts manager for the International Finance Corporation, the financial sector arm of the World Bank Group. There, I worked with business leaders on their strategic and operational HR needs. And it was an exciting time because it was a time when the emphasis in the organization was on decentralizing some business areas to regional hubs to better serve IFC's stakeholders. My client service role continued at the International Monetary Fund, where I initially managed the HR function in a regional department and subsequently moved to the HR department itself on a specialist role in performance management and then succession management, leading with an excellent team. It was also an exciting time there because it was a time of reformation within the organization, resulting in an increased focus on strengthening leadership skills at all managerial levels and broadening opportunities for all staff. Finally, I got a chance to work in the business, which is what I had always dreamed for, and moving completely out of human resources to the IMF Institute for Capacity Development as an operations manager. And this provided me with a unique understanding of the core business areas of the IMF with more depth and collaborating with regional capacity development centers in Asia, Middle East, and Europe. And also, it gave me an opportunity to see HR from the eye of the business, which was really great. I finally came full circle on my return back to HR after 6 years in the operations management division, where I also had oversight of some of the intense and complex side of HR. So I'm thankful for my career because it gave me the opportunity to work in multiple roles in HR, the business, lead very exciting programs and projects, and hone my leadership skills, managing local and multi-country employees and working with colleagues from different continents. So I'll stop there.
Oh, thank you so much for the rich insight, Tolu. What may I ask, and this may be a tricky one, but may I ask, what would you say you're most proud of in terms of your career and achievements?
Mm. Well, I'm first of all most proud of the impact that I have made working with great team members in my varied, and diverse roles. But I'd like to just highlight three quick areas that
Thank
I think of and makes me glad. So one was leading the rebranding effort of FSB International Bank, working with a UK agency at that time in a comprehensive program that started with redefining who we are as a financial institution and reflecting this strategically in all areas of the business, including employee types, our communication to stakeholders, the colors, logo, work environment, and so on. It was a real huge task, but it was a really exciting task, and I think it was positively received by the public. The second I would quickly say is during the COVID pandemic. At that time, I was at the IMF Institute for Capacity Development, and I led the response to COVID there, which, as you know, was a Herculean assignment at that time. And so I worked with counterparts across the organization, including the field office and collaborating with other institutions. And it was very intense, but I think I'm proud of how the institution managed it and proud to have been a part of that. And lastly would be my contributions to strengthening leadership capacity at the IMF, including the introduction of department talent reviews to provide targeted and more robust feedback to employees. And this helped them tremendously because at that time, the talent reviews were done centrally. And so it was great to be in a pioneer state with talent reviews in the department. And so I would say that those three things come to mind when I think about things that I have done that have really gladdened my heart.
Thank you so, so much. What richness of experience. Thank you. And so at the beginning you said how you're involved in a very exciting, what I might call portfolio of different career and challenges at the moment. And what would you say excites you most about the work you're doing at the moment? Is there a common trend? I don't know, common theme?
Yeah. This is actually a very interesting question. Having just moved out of corporate after a number of decades, and I am working on several initiatives that will benefit from the extensive corporate and community experience that I've had. I'm also excited to continue the impactful and transformative work of supporting leaders to be the best versions of themselves as a coach and contribute to the alignment of HR practices, with institutional goals. So yeah, it's basically in the same space that I do have a real passion for.
Thank you so much. Which passion brings us to employee value propositions. And so today our conversation will be very much about that, how employee value propositions have evolved and how they impact organizational HR practices. And I wonder if we might start, Tolu, by just asking you why you're so passionate about employee value propositions.
I'm so passionate about it because, the employee is the heart of the organization. In fact, I refer to it as the heartbeat of the organization because the organization is not the building, it's not the premises, it's actually the people, and it's the people that can make a difference, and it's the people that can enable the corporate goals and the corporate mandate and priorities to be achieved. So it's very central to every organization.
Yeah. So people are the heartbeat. Beautiful phrase. Yeah. And so we hear I quite often hear people talking about EVPs in shorthand, and so I think it's worth stopping for a moment and saying, what exactly are employee value propositions?
Well, simply put, EVPs, employee value propositions, are comprehensive packages of benefits, rewards, and experiences that any organization would offer to its potential and existing employees in exchange for their skills, capabilities, and performance. So the key word there is in exchange, so there's something the organization wants and there's something that the employees bring into the organization to enable them to fulfill their corporate objectives. I would say, however, that this exchange is dynamic. It's not something that is static. It's something that continues to change throughout, the organization's life cycle and also the people itself. And I would say lastly that an interesting way to describe EVPs that I have seen comes from Ernst & Young, saying that EVP is the articulation of the why. And it's why join, why engage, and why stay with a company. And I think when you have that in mind, it helps you to give context to what the EVP is about.
Yeah, and articulation strikes me as an interesting word. So so you've mentioned that the EVP is a whole package that helps us think about why we stay, engage, and frankly join in the first place. And you talked about some of the ingredients around benefits and rewards and so on.
Mhm.
How how do you think employee value propositions should be communicated? I don't know whether, and that's probably quite a big question. So is it that they exist without communication? Is it that they need to be packaged up? I don't know.
Well, one thing I would say is that it needs to be deliberate and
Right.
intentional. And it also needs to be strategic and quite structured in its approach, using quite a lot of multiple channels. And I think today we are blessed with multiple channels to be able to communicate as an organization, even as individual. So I would say to potential employees, there's so many opportunities that any organization have. You have websites, you have career websites where you can message your EVP and let people know who you are and what your organization is about. And in those websites, you can also put employee testimonials because the employee is your best advertiser. So it's very important that existing employees are there. Also, for potential employees, I think areas that present opportunities include job postings. In there, as you describe the job, you can first of all let people be aware of what's important and valued by the organization. And I would say social media. And, what can I say? LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. I mean, I've even seen um, organizations use TikTok. So
Yeah.
there's a whole range of channels that could be used in that area. And lastly, for potential employees, I would say recruitment events. That's an excellent opportunity to show your brand. Um, for existing employees, they're already in the organization. I think you have to start from when they join the organization, like the onboarding process, so that they've heard about you, they liked what they see, and they come into the organization. It's really important at that point to start integrating your EVP into your onboarding so that that messaging can continue to resonate with current employees. Also, you have internal communication channels, just as we have external, the intranet, newsletters. There's so many avenues for that. But I think one very important avenue is also regular feedback. Doing surveys, getting feedbacks, conducting it regularly, so that you can sort of like have a hand on the pulse. Is how I would say it. Leadership, lastly, is also very important. Leadership must be visible and also message consistently the EVPs, either through town halls, meetings, wherever they can. So I think with that, that would help you to attract, retain talents that align with your company's values and culture.
So interesting, and thank you so much for articulating all those different channels of communication. And it sounds to me, it kind of brings me back to the word that you used a bit at the beginning, that an EVP should be deliberate.
Yes,
Because I suppose being deliberate means that you're mindful about how you share information about your organization through each of those channels.
absolutely.
Is it right to say then that not being deliberate and intentional means that messages are getting out in any case about your culture, and that the EVP perhaps being mindful is perhaps a way to manage that?
Absolutely. And I think the real point of that is if you're not being intentional, then you might experience inconsistencies in the type
Right.
of messages that are going out. And I think that doesn't really serve the organization.
Yeah, so one reason it's important then is this notion of consistency and conveying and driving the organization you
Yeah,
want. Are there
absolutely.
any other key reasons why you would say EVPs matter? Having a definite EVP matters.
Well, EVPs are very important because EVPs is enables you to bring in to attract and retain
Yeah.
employees that will thrive in your organization. It also helps you to um, ensure that those who join the organization, you're meeting the needs and the areas in which is important to them. And if done well, employees who join your organization with a very attractive and consistent EVP, they will tend to be committed to your organization's vision, your mission. As I said earlier, they're the best advertisement for your organization. And I think a really critical area is happy employees make happy customers, right? Because
Yeah.
they then provide excellent customer experience, which in many cases lead to increased sales and profits. In fact, I just wanted, a Gallup survey in the last few years, talked about how organizations with strong and proactively managed EVP see a 10% increase in productivity and a 69% reduction in employee turnover and 30% increase in profitability. I mean, which organization wouldn't want that?
Yeah, absolutely. And indeed, great place to work statistics very much back that up as well. I have to go, yeah, share at this stage. Absolutely. I mean, with in yeah, with a very similar perspective. And hmm, so so having established that these EVPs summing up the proposition for employees and in a way perhaps shaping the culture. I'm interested to think about perhaps how do you see that the concept of EVP has evolved over time?
As you say that, it makes me remember my parents, my grandparents when they went to work,
Mm,
because at that time, EVPs were, it was transactional, basically. There was a transactional way of providing value to employees. At that time, the employee really wanted, what did the employee want, especially pre the 1980s? They wanted a stable job. They wanted to have job security. They wanted basic benefits like health insurance and retirement plans, and then they wanted the long service award after 30, 40 years, which is incredible. Whereas the employees themselves thought that as long as they gave them stability and also the fact that they were able to get competitive pay, then that was dusted. That was their role. So it's interesting how over the years it has evolved to include areas like, well, not necessarily financial areas like compensation, benefits like health insurance, etc., but
mm,
going people caring more about their professional development. You see that happened over even through into the 90s, I believe. That started becoming very important. People wanted to be able to have a say in what kind of professional training they had, what kind of development programs existed within the organizations. And so organizations had to sit up at that point. And side by side with that was work-life balance also started becoming, sipping into our lives. And part of it was a lot more women were working as well. And they needed that to be able to thrive within the organization. And then we moved on, and then we started talking about corporate culture, purpose. The 2000s was full of all that. People wanted a positive work environment. They wanted a purpose and a sense of purpose within the organization. So organizations had to rise up and start thinking through what kind of environments we have, what's the culture of our organization like, what kind of work environment will attract and retain top talent. Things like that started percolating in the
mm,
20s, and then we moved on to really having a holistic um, and more comprehensive package where it wasn't just about the money, but it was about what other things are you going to be able to give me, and then in the 20s, we cannot but talk about the influence of the technology companies, and how that has changed the way of work, the future of work in so many ways, enabling remote work, enabling a better work-life balance area. So this has been evolving to the point whereby COVID has now brought the whole issue of mental health, well-being, and brought that right to the front of everyone, all employers. So greater attention and more resources are now being put into such areas, including diversity and inclusion initiatives. I think the last point that I would make is the fact that we now have millennials and Gen Zs in the workforce who want autonomy and they want ownership of the work. So it's very important for them. It's not just about the pay. They want the lifestyle and the balance of work and their personal lives. So I think that will, I hope I've been able to give sort of like a flow of what that has been like, the evolution over the years.
Yeah. So employee value propositions have evolved as we've evolved as people in terms of what we expect on average of a workplace, and what might have been seen as a requirement years ago is quite different to what's seen as a requirement now.
Mhm.
So in order to keep the organizations, presumably in order to achieve what they need to and attract the best talent, have a different set of things to provide to make that fair exchange
Yes,
you described at the beginning.
yes. And I just wanted to add that
Mm.
one of the benefits of that is organizations have become a lot more creative, a lot more on top of it, and EVPs have become much more robust, and there's more attention to it as a result of that evolution.
Mm. Yeah. So would you say perhaps we as employees are expecting more out of our organizations?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
Which we might argue, but yeah, in order to, yeah, for that exchange, I'm probably giving a lot as well. Hmm. Well, should we pause for a moment because I see we have a question in the chat and just check in on that. And thank you so much, Monica. Um, she says, sounds to me like EVP is led by the organization. What's the difference, interesting, between employee value proposition versus individual value proposition? And she means led by organizations.
Proposition. Very interesting question, I
Yeah.
must say. Individual value proposition. So the employee value proposition, yes, it is led by the organization. And I dare say to also mention by the leadership of the organization. It's very important that they are very involved in it. HR is an enabler, but the leadership should be driving this in every area of their strategic thinking. So that, yes, for employee value proposition. For individual value proposition, I think we're now talking about the employee themselves. What is it they want? What is of value to them? And why, as I said earlier on, why should I join this organization? Why should I engage in this organization? What would I benefit from that? So individually, each person has what's important to them. And the organization has both what's important to the organization and what's important to the individuals, the employees, and have to create that balance that is able to make sure that they become or they retain their preferred place to work status if they have that.
Mm. Thank you so much. And you touched on a very interesting point about who is responsible, let's say, for driving the EVP. And you mentioned, in a sense, the organization in inverted commas is, but leaders are also. So what role would you say leadership plays in driving, or should play, shall we say, in driving an EVP?
So leadership is looking at the organization. I mean, every organization is existing for a specific reason, right? And leadership has that responsibility to make sure that all the resources that are required for the mandate to be fulfilled, for the corporate goals to be achieved, is is there and it's in place. And the employee value proposition is something that is really central to the organization achieving its mandate. So the role of leadership would be to ensure that in the conversations and discussions, the strategic conversations and the leadership conversations about how to move the organization forward, that the employee is a central part of how that can be done.
Yeah. Yeah. So I understand. So then the employer is the employees are the enabling factor that means strategy will or won't be delivered. And actually, the leaders, perhaps you might say, in my sort of terms as conductors of the orchestra, are responsible for making sure perhaps that EVP is met or held in mind, I think you were saying, yeah.
Yeah, correct. And also to ensure that the environment in which the organization is in is a conducive environment. It's an environment where employees will thrive. It's an environment where people feel safe and people are able to be open, and where diversity is important as well.
Mm. Hmm. And how do the best organizations assess whether they're meeting their wonderful EVP promise, assuming they've done the right thing, understood what's required, and set up a really strong EVP promise? How do they assess whether they're meeting the promise?
Well, first of all, I think one pretty obvious one is you're able to attract top talent, right?
Mm,
Um, High quality candidates consistently apply to your organization. And so I think that's a very visible indication of that. Um, Other areas in which the organization can see if they're being successful or not is if they're having low turnover rates of their top talents. And because a high employee retention also shows that um, employees are satisfied and they see value in staying with the organization. It's also, feedback surveys will tell you the satisfaction level of organizations, the morale, and also indicate clear signs of, what's being rolled out, whether it's successful or not. So there are quite a number of ways that you can see that. There's also the area of the reputation of the brand, and places like your organization, Great Place to Work, will provide information about which truly are the great places that individuals can thrive in as well. I also think that, there are also agencies that come up like Glassdoor, for instance, where alumni from the institution go and they place their experience working there. And, that could be a really good way of finding out, even
yeah.
though it's pretty qualitative, meaning that a lot depends on the experience the individual had, but it's also indicative as well. Yeah, so you also find that a successful EVP naturally aligns with the strategic goals of the organization, and that helps to contribute to the success and competitiveness of the organization. So those are just some ways. There are many others as well that we can talk to, but I'll just stop there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Some really useful, concrete ways of measuring and understanding there, from just a simple notion of how attractive, how many applications do we get per role, what our turnover is, what's the overall employee experience, as you say. Rightly note, we work with an awful lot of organisations to help them really get to the heart of that, and things like brand reputation. I was very struck by your phrase that and the sense of it that a successful EVP is one that really aligns with strategic goals.
Yeah.
How how do organizations make that happen? So how do they balance what they perceive to be the sort of needs and appetites of employees with their
Yeah.
strategy?
Well, I mean, when you look at a strategy for an organization, you're actually looking at why do we exist in the first place? Why,
Yeah.
and what is it that we want to achieve, and how do we want to achieve it? When do we want to achieve it? So these are questions that come up in strategy sessions, right? And
Mm.
it's important that your EVP is aligning with the why, with the what, with the how, and the when. And I think that's a very simple and straightforward way to be able to align your EVP to your strategy.
Mm. Thank you so much. So simplifying it in a sense and asking those questions, does it align with what we need to achieve, what, how, and when?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And I suppose one of the things I'm also fascinated talking to you about is this wonderful experience that you have both in HR and then on the other side of the fence as the eye, beautiful phrase, eye of the business.
Yes.
And I wonder what, how would you say it's best to persuade, if you need to, operational people of the importance of an EVP?
Operational people.
Yes, I suppose so. So, for example, one might imagine that often working, I suppose, as we both do in the sort of HR and psychologist arena, there's a natural passion for EVPs, and it's sort of intuitive that this stuff really matters.
Yes, it does
And
matter.
that's that natural passion, yeah, may well cascade across the business, but actually, yeah, I'm just wondering whether you have any thoughts of how to sort of, yeah,
Well,
infuse that enthusiasm across an organization.
you know, the first thing that comes to mind as you say that is the fact that the business is also desirous of an attractive EVP. Each
Mm.
person is, desirous of an attractive EVP. So they are already motivated because they are first and foremost the employees, and they're working within the organization. So
Mm.
I think the good thing about that is, every employee also wants to feel valued. They want to feel that the work that they're doing
Yeah.
is being appreciated and it's being rewarded and compensated appropriately. So I think that is first of all an initial aspect of um, having an EVP, or for them desiring to have an EVP.
Mm.
So I think it's not so much about desiring an EVP, it's desiring an attractive EVP, right? And so operationally, I think probably the individuals that some work needs to be done on probably would be like the leadership, the CEO, because they are the ones that are releasing resources to make sure that the EVP is attractive. They
Right.
are the ones that are ensuring that they are communicating effectively and consistently out there, so people want to come to the organization, people want to stay in the organizations. And I think they're the ones who it's really important that they're on board and they're also driving this. And there are some ways in which one can approach leadership regarding this.
Thank you so much for pointing us to us that it's the, yeah, leadership passion that is really important here as well. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And a really compelling point that, yeah, for all of us, wherever we sit, an attractive EPP matters. Of course it does.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And having mentioned leadership, I
Mm.
think, you know, a question would be, so how would you approach leadership? And I don't know if, that was on your mind, but, you
Yeah.
know, with leadership, I think it's very important, to have, um, compelling data and research. And that's why institutions like yours and, Gallup and so many others that exist are important, because leadership wants to see how it has worked. They want to see what the benefit would be. They want to have that compelling data that enables them to clearly see how companies can outperform their
Yeah.
competitors, market share, innovation, customer service, things like that. And it's important when we talk to our leadership to make sure that we're able to link how the EVP connects with the business outcomes, because that's important for leadership. That's important for any CEO. So we have to have clear connections of the strong EVP and a financial performance. So, and also, of course, we talked about the strategic goals. It has to support the strategic goals. So, I mean, these are ways we can also give tangible examples.
Yes.
Start with quick wins for a skeptical CEO, for instance, and ensure that we're engaging with them on a regular basis. Yeah, stop there.
Yeah, no. So yes, and actually talking about a skeptical CEO, that was one of the things I was really interested in. How would you persuade her or him that actually, listen, EVPs do matter? And it sounds like your answer is kind of along the lines, as well as it's about decency, it's about give me the data. How does this impact the bottom line? And I like the observation that, yeah, it's not just that, but it's also give me the quick wins and keep communicating with me about it. Keep it on my radar. Yeah. Is there anything else that you might do to prevent there may not be? I think that sounds pretty comprehensive, but is there anything else that you would do to persuade a skeptical CEO that they should invest in their EVP?
Well, I think some of the things that you could do also is um, address the CEO or leadership's concern. What's the specific concern that they have. And I think it's very important that when you are addressing leadership, that you present how an EVP is an investment rather than a cost, because many times you find that um, there are a lot of competing priorities within the organization. So some leadership or CEOs are not necessarily completely convinced that this is a priority for them. So you have to be able to show how that is an investment. And I think a lot of what we have said earlier on speaks to that rather than the cost. So that's really important. I think also you should share success stories, and compare your company's current EVP from the employee feedback with successful stories of how EVPs has helped the bottom line of other organizations. Also, I mean, like examples exist. I was checking, and places like Google, for instance, they're known for their exceptional work environment. They're very into career development opportunities. They have comprehensive benefits, and we know how successful they are and how it's a very attractive place to work. Well, you probably will tell me better from your surveys, but this is one of the places where the EVP is centered around innovation, well-being, and growth. You also have the same with Microsoft, and they focus a lot on inclusion, opportunities to learn. They're very mission driven, and a lot of this is very attractive, especially to the younger employees. A lot of the Gen Zs, for instance, are looking for environments like that where they value diversity, value impact, and I think that's important. It's interesting because a couple of years ago, I visited Zappos as part of a group during an HR conference in Las Vegas. And I was amazed at the level of informality and inclusion practiced in this organization. Of course, the employees are largely Gen Z, very casual environment, but very comfortable. And the employees obviously felt very free and able to say what they wanted. I remember seeing the HR policies were posted on the wall and had very clear expectations, for employees and how they, should create a conducive work environment. But fundamentally, what really struck me about that environment was they had this digital device on the walls, and what that showed was the sales that were being made worldwide by Zappos. So it showed how the organization was connecting with its employee and making them a part of their own success stories, and I thought that was excellent. And you could see that the employees were really plugged into the work that they were doing, into the business of Zappos. And I think that's really commendable.
Yeah. So knowing how what I do matters and contributes to something that is important and being kept up to
Yeah.
date, very much part of it.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. I'm going to squeeze in one more question before we open the floor for questions from the people who've kindly joined us. And I'm afraid it's a big one, but what would you say are the three most important things to get right when working on your organization's EVP? So we've said it's really important to be intentional and deliberate, that these things happen, whether you articulate them or not, but you must articulate them deliberately. So what would you say are the most important things to get right when we're working on an EVP?
Mm. Well, the first one I think is whatever has been promised, what the EVP says and has been articulated and communicated between the employer and current and prospective employees. That promise needs to be seen, because
Mhm.
it's reciprocal agreement. It's outlining the value of the offer to the people as employees and the values they are going to bring to the organization in return. So that promise should align with public perception. So that
Right.
promise should be out there. So and what the public has seen, or the perception, should match what the EVP is saying. And I think that's really important for the credibility of the organization
Yeah.
and for the integrity of the organization. So that would be the first. The second would be the employees that are already in the organization. And they are living the experience, right? And I think what's important is the whatever the feedback surveys, retention statistics, whatever is being um, fed back to the organization should reflect the experience that was promised. So it's
Right.
very important that on an ongoing basis that organizations are making sure that they're keeping their promise and they're evolving with the time, evolving with the different, demographics, the different technological issues that are going on, and they're staying on top of things so that that lived experience from the employees can be acknowledged and recognized by all. The
Thank
third,
you.
I
It's
think,
dynamic. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, okay. So the third that I think would be, I think what you also mentioned just now about the communication to all these stakeholders, internal and external, the fact that it should be consistent, intentional, and it should reinforce the EVP. So the choice of messaging is important to help the attraction and retention of best talent, and also seeing that it's feeding into the business results. So that's what I would say, the three important. And they seem very simple, but embedded in them is really a work that is required by the organization.
Yes. Thank you so much, Tolu. Oh, well, I think it's now time to turn to our questions. And thank you so much, first of all, to everybody who for really embracing our request at the beginning to find out where people are joining us from. And I'm so delighted that we've got people from quite a wide range of locations, from Nigeria to South Africa to Canada to the States. And thank you all for your warmth in joining in and sharing that about yourselves. And thank you to those too who've posed questions. So we have 4 questions. So Patience has a question for us, and she says, what role can employees play in co-creating EVP in their organizations?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. And it's excellent because the employees already play a part if surveys are being conducted and there are opportunities within the organization where they can share their views, like in town halls, for instance. And also for those who rather share it anonymously, that there's opportunity for that as well. I think as employees, in the past, employers dictated and employees sort of fell in place. I think over the years, even employers have realize the importance of having employee inputs in there. So I would say be bold, be courageous,
Mhm.
um, you know, because it's your journey as well. And it's very important that you ask the right questions and also provide innovative ideas, suggestions of how the organization can do better and be better.
Thank you so much. And a second question from patients is, what resources are available to organisations who want to enhance their EVPs? Hmm.
Hmm. I think the first one I would say is organizations who provide data. That's very important and do a lot of research and are able to provide up-to-date information on how EVPs are evolving. So that's definitely is one
Mm.
area that I think every organization should leverage because it's very important for them to do that. Also, it's important also um, there are a lot of articles, information out there about how EVPs can be improved, enhanced, and you have, you know, magazines like the Harvard Business Review. You have a lot. You have, BCG, you have a lot of leadership organizations that bring out a lot of work on this. You have the Society of Human Resources and so many other. And I think that's really important. The other area that I would talk about is look inward. There's a lot of information internally, and I think you need to leverage those information to be able to enhance your EVP. And I would say learn from other organizations because your colleagues are there. There are people who are walking and have walked. Learn from your competitors as well is something else that I would say.
Yeah.
So these are just a few things I think would help. And the last I would say is leadership must be on board. So we've talked about how we can do that. I think it would be good to have um, them on the same plate with regards to EVP.
Thank you so much. Well, Colette asks us, to what extent is leadership involved in transitioning employees to be better versions of themselves? And how should leadership add such value to the employee without being selfish?
Okay, so the first is to what extent leadership can.
Is involved in transitioning employees to be better versions of themselves. So, yes, how does, yeah.
Well, first of all, an enabling environment is very important. An enabling environment is important because um, leadership's behavior is being watched, right?
Mm.
I think it's important that leadership model what they want to see in their employees. So that's one. Secondly, I think it's also what resources are available to support employees to be better versions of themselves, like coaching, like mentoring. I mean, these are areas, um, career opportunities within the organization so people can have a broader career experience, a rich experience. I think that's really important for any organization. The ability to scale up, to understand what's required of them and to be able to develop areas that have been, pointed out as opportunities for them to grow. So, and having said that, I think, from my experience, I think leadership integrity is key, meaning that being open and being able to support individuals and and let them feel that they have a stake in their success. I think that there's nothing that beats that. I have benefited from excellent supervisors, and I still I'm very grateful and feel blessed to have been able to have some of the supervisors that I've had. And I think it's really being there and guiding firmly, but showing that you're in this journey with them is very important. So I think with that, the career management, mentoring, conducive environment, ability to speak to leadership in and for leadership to listen. I think these are some things that I will just throw out there.
Thank you. So it's leadership behavior and attitudes and integrity as well. Thank you. And we've just got a couple more questions, so I hope we can briefly touch on them. Angela Art says, thank you for the very insightful session. How often can companies or should companies change EVP?
That is also an interesting question. Thank you for that. There's no one cap fits all. There are a lot of things that influence the way EVPs are evolving. So there isn't a one cap fits all for that. What I would say, however, is that we should look at what's going on around us in terms of there's so many things that are influencing how we work, e.g., globalization, for instance. For instance, talents are no longer seen as available just locally. We have the whole world to be able to get our talents from. And I think knowing that there's been a death of talents. I mean, that has been reported. Hopefully it's getting better. And so you have the whole world, the globe, to find who it is that would be best for you. So there is no one cap fit all in that regard.
Right.
The other thing that I would say with regards to that is, we have, demographics changing and what are their needs. We need to respond to that. We have technology, we have social movements, going on, diversity, equity, inclusion, so I think you can actually take a stand and say, when we're reviewing our strategies, when we're reviewing, or you can have a much more fluid way of looking at it and responding to the external and internal forces that, that would require a relook at what it is that is, that needs to be enhanced in your EVP. I mean, for instance, the COVID-19 just came upon us and a lot of changes had to be made on the spot. So I would say that no one cap fits all. The other thing that I would say is that there are regional peculiarities, and situation considerations that have to be taken. And so country-specific issues. And so as leadership and HR organizations need to be on top, they need to be aware, they need to be sensitive to what's going on around them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And for our final question, David asks, what are the EVP concepts and interventions that professionals can develop to propel employers' branding?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Of course. So David asks us, what are the EVP concepts and interventions that professionals can develop to propel employers' branding? So are there any particular concepts and interventions that you'd sort of focus on us on? Or maybe it's about, as you said, holistically understanding employees' wants.
Initiatives. So first, I think what's central to the EVP is the ability to attract and retain and motivate employees to hopefully get excellent business results and to be able to serve your customers better. And I think that has to be central in as we think about concepts and intervention. What do you have now, in terms of what kind of things matter to your employees? What's important for the organization? How do you connect that together in a way that provides the results that you're looking for? Because nothing is standing out in a vacuum, right? There's an objective you want to achieve from your EVP. And I think I would say the importance of that is to be clear as to what's the objective, what is it that you want to achieve, and then how is that supporting your business goals, your strategy, and then what would a potential or a top talent look like for your organization? I think that kind of thought process is important to be able to get to the interventions that you want. As I mean, I gave a classic example on the COVID. I mean, maybe because I worked on it, so it just keeps coming back. You know, it came upon us, and we had to do something. We had to make sure that employees are safe in their respective regions, right? We had to make sure that employees could be evacuated if they were not in environments where that the medical facilities were not at the best. There was a lot that we had to do. We had to educate, we had to train, we had to have individuals that had been selected or identified as point persons in respective locations. So I just give that as an example of how you have to be responsive. And apart from incidental things like that, technology, there's some standard things that we already do anyway in the area of pensions and medical benefits, and to pay time off. We have our salaries and so many other things which are standard across board. And then we have to just look at what are the peculiarities and the country specific situation or competition that can help us to hone our EVPs.
Thank you so much, Tolu. And I would love to carry on talking a much longer time about this, but I want to just say thank you so much. It's been an honor talking to you, and thank you for everybody listening to us today. And I will now, after saying thank you, hand over to our leader of Great Place to Work Nigeria, Otumere, to sum up for us and say final words. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tolu and Petrina, for this excellent conversation. Some things stood out when Tolu was talking, because we have these conversations a lot of times. When we're having discussions with HR leaders, we say to them, the culture process, the culture discussions around the culture, the survey is not a cost element, it's an investment element. And we point to some data. And Tolu talked about data. So allow me share a few of that information we have across Great Place to Work around employer value propositions and the benefits that it brings to companies. Allow me just a minute to share my slide. Just a minute. Yes. While preparing or trying to get people ready for this session, I put out a quote and said, with a strong EVP in place or in play, our people shine as MVPs all the way. But with regard to data, we see from a employee retention, that organizations that are certified as great workplaces experience 50% lower turnover compared to their industry peers. We see also from analysis around employee engagement that 89% of employees at Great Place to Work certified companies report a high level of engagement. We also see around business performance. So this is the slide I always share with HR leaders to say that the survey itself, it can't be seen as a cost element, it's an investment. So please, when you're having discussions with your MD, having discussions with the CFO, point to the fact that return on investments has been shown over a 24-year period to be 3 times higher in terms of revenue growth for great workplaces. Analysis also shows that in terms of employer branding, that Great Place to Work certified companies receive 2.5 times more job applications than non-certified companies. We had the opportunity in Q1 this year to go around our certified companies. And one thing they said resoundingly was the fact that being certified has attracted great talent to them, has attracted people to them, because primarily their value proposition is much improved when they are certified as great workplaces. Analysis also points to the fact that employees at great workplaces show to be 50% more productive at work. Bloomberg had done a similar analysis where they had compared the Fortune 100 best companies and the S&P 500 companies across in the US. The Fortune 100 best companies are the same as the Great Place to Work 100 best companies in the US. And analysis over that period showed that these companies showed a return on investments much higher. Innovation also too, 85% of employees at best workplaces report that they are willing to give extra to get the job done, fostering a culture of innovation and excellence. Next steps for me would be get certified, get onto our list. Thank you very much for this session. It's been a very, very insightful session that we've had. Look forward to seeing you again next month when we have another excellent speaker come share great insights. Thank you very much. Have a great day. And back at the salah to our Muslim brothers and friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tolu.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Best wishes to everybody.